Hi everyone. Hi Mika.
Hi,
Super
Pierre.
glad
Everybody.
to see you again. Hello, hello. So
Likewise.
Mika Perttula will speak about in his video how lubricant CO2 footprint analysis contributes to organization net zero targets. So very long title indeed.
Mm.
And so there will be a video, and you can post all your questions. I will mark that down, and later we'll address your questions. So sit back and relax. It's coming here.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you LRVS participants around the globe. And welcome to this track 4 discussing ESG and sustainability. My name is Mika Perttula. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Food Intelligence. And in this session, I will discuss and cover how lubricant CO2 footprint analysis contributes to organizations' net zero targets. We'll first draw a big picture of global greenhouse gas emissions and how lubricants fit in the picture. Then a brief overview of used analysis and reporting frameworks, and then we'll deep dive in challenges that organizations face when targeting net zero, and then the actual CO2 analysis and reporting. And then we'll cover opportunities and benefits of CO2 analysis and reporting for organizations, especially from lubricants perspective. Then a brief example how we can automate CO2 analysis and reporting, and then we'll have a short Q&A session. But let's start first with the big picture. The global greenhouse gas emissions have been growing quite significantly over the past decades, and is nowadays around 59 gigatons CO2 equivalent. And it's been growing from 38 gigatons 1990 in less than 30 years to 59. And of course, much of CO2 is coming from energy production and consumption and from fossil fuels. But of course, a big part of emissions is also produced in different kind of industrial processes, process using energy, transportation, and then rest is coming from agriculture, forestry, land use, and waste treatment activities. So how does lubricants fit in the picture? We are consuming over 40 million tons of new oil each year, heavy industry and road transportation combined. So it's around 180 million tons of CO2. So might look a bit small compared to global emissions, but once we take into account lubricants' role in all of our operations, it's somewhat bigger than we may anticipate first. Because we know that almost 5% of industrial production is get closed of unplanned downtimes each year, and 50 to 80% of rotating machines and hydraulic systems failures linked to lubricants. So it's a fairly big impact to the industrial production as a whole. And costs of downtimes and direct lubricants OPEX costs, it's a massive 900 billion each year. So it has also a big financial impact to our operations. And yeah, we are using 4 million tons of fresh oil each year, and the number is increasing all the time. So it has quite a big impact to our operations. And of course, when you think like a single year, it doesn't sound much. But as an example from pulp and paper factory, you may see tens of thousands of liters, even not 100,000 liters, circulating in your system on different production lines. And when we go higher on enterprise level, it can be estimated that it's already on 1 million liters level. So when companies are targeting net zero, they really can't bypass role of lubricants, because you are not able to get in the net zero if you have millions of liters of oil running in your systems and no ways of managing that better. And of course, if you even change part of that million liter, it has quite a significant cost to your operations, not to mention the impact on reliability. So lubricants have a clear role in industrial operations and in our targets to net zero. Let's turn our eyes to different ways to calculate and report CO2 emissions. There are quite a few different frameworks, calculation models on national levels, international level, for different industries and purposes. So it may look like quite a jungle when you first look at it. But here I want to present one pretty widely adopted model based on World Resources Institute's greenhouse gas protocol. And some 9 out of 10 Fortune 500 companies are using this protocol. And also it's a basis for many other calculation frameworks. So in this GST protocol, they cover this topic in a pretty nice and clear way. So they basically divide greenhouse gases into 3 different scopes. And in the first scope, it focuses on our direct emissions that we do and generate in our operations, whether it's industrial operation, your delivery fleet, the properties that you own, or the waste management activities that you do. So that's under scope 1. And scope 2 then focuses on purchased energy that you are buying from energy companies and not produced by yourself. And then scope 3 is basically covering all the other emissions coming from your value chain, from upstream, your operations, to downstream. So this is a nice illustration of these three different scopes. And when we see that where does lubricants fit, it's scope 3, and in upstream activities, it's mainly our operations that we do and where we generate oil, and the waste that we generate of our operations. And then in downstream, it's more to do with like OEMs, machines, engines that we use in the operations, and what kind of emissions those machines generate. And of course, we could think that basically lubricants-related CO2 emissions should be calculated under oil and gas producers' balance sheets. But we are seeing that regulation is going forward, and also much of scope 3 emissions will get regulated in the coming years. And many of the companies are already anticipating this, and therefore they are already starting to report also their scope 3 emissions. But let's turn our eyes to the challenges that the companies face in general when they target net zero, and then on more detail that what kind of challenges we see when we start doing like CO2 analysis and reporting. But this illustration gives us a pretty good overview that what kind of challenges companies are facing today. So when companies have started a few years ago addressing CO2 emissions, reducing those, it has been pretty straightforward, and you have been able to find lots of low-hanging fruits, and by buying clean energy, changing your energy to more and more clean, implement different kind of energy efficiency activities, and sourcing materials and operations that consume and produce less CO2. But when we go forward, having the same impact many times means that we need to do more work, use more resources, and time also to achieve that target. And as we are targeting net zero, we need to do even more. So we need to be innovating new energy sources and developing like green hydrogen, for example, new materials and processes like carbon-free steel, and so on. In circular models, we really need to go deep and get those on net zero level. And for many companies, they also need to assess their existing business strategies, where there's a need for divestments of some business units and to invest somewhere else. So it takes more time and effort to get the same impacts. So we are seeing that it starts to impact on all fronts of our lives and business operations. So every action counts, and therefore also lubricants have a really clear role in our way to net zero. When we talk about the CO2 analysis reporting itself, we come up with quite a few challenges as well. And most of the times we end up working and spending quite a time with data. So do we have the data available? What kind of a history we have? How complete the data is? Are we missing some bits and pieces? And how comparable the data is? And many times we end up spending quite a lot of time working with the data before we are on a level where we can really start doing like a CO2 analysis and reporting. And of course, data validation that what we are analyzing and reporting holds true. This is fairly new activity to many companies, so building this competence and starting to do actual reporting also takes time, and many times we also need some external resources to get the advice and to get our process going. This should also be a process that we continue annually. So how to make it as one part of your daily activity and on a high level enough. And of course, as we see that we are now moving more towards from scope 1 and scope 2 to also scope 3, it means that it's not anymore our organization's sustainability teams who can do all the work, but it starts really impacting all of us. And for that we need, of course, more training and learning so that we get it as part of our daily activity. And the other thing outside of our companies is, of course, that once we have the report and our CO2 balance ready, how comparable that is to our peers. Are everybody using similar kind of frameworks and calculation methods? And are they including all the data that we are including? But fortunately, we are seeing that the GST accounting standards are getting more formal and more regulated, so we can trust that in the near future, comparing our data to others gives us a fairly good picture of how we are performing compared to our peers. Let's next see that what kind of opportunities we have for our organizations from CO2 analysis and reporting, and especially from lubricants perspective. So as we just saw that one big challenge many times comes from data, incompleteness of the data and the history. But that is something that we can see that with lubricants, actually, we are seeing here a potential low-hanging fruit, because lubricants have been measured regularly quite a long time already, based on lab, and nowadays more and more with different kind of real-time methods. So we have the history data. We also have data of oil changes, overhauls, and even the balance of the oil, how much we buy new fresh oil each year, and how much we are disposing the oil from our operations. So from that perspective, CO2 analysis and reporting is a fairly straightforward process, and that's why lubricants is one really good way to contribute to our targets. And also based on this data, we can really take meaningful actions in our operations that contribute directly to our CO2 targets. We have many proven ways how we can maintain the quality and performance of lubricants, extend the life cycle of the lubricants, and then, well, the impacts are easily measured. So we can take different proactive strategies in use, real-time or regular monitoring, different fluid reconditioning activities like filtration, antioxidant top-ups, use new chemicals and lubricants like Fluidex, Deacon or Solvancer, and many other that are available on the markets. So this is something really positive for us. So there's a clear link from lubricants, operating with the lubricants, to our net zero targets. So taking the measured actions to maximize the life cycle of the operations, and then analyzing, measuring, and reporting that activity brings many benefits for our organizations. So as we many times think that targeting net zero is a cost for us. So from lubricants perspective, when we target net zero, we basically naturally start taking the relevant actions that first parallel contributes to our reliability. So once we keep our lubricants in perfect shape and the performance on a needed level, we are seeing reliability increases. And then end of the day, we will see also the benefits on our bottom line as an increased profitability. So even in many areas, companies are facing challenges, finding ways to reduce CO2 emissions. Lubricants is something that really is still a low-hanging fruit and ripe for picking for us. So let's next see a short example how we can automate a big part of CO2 analysis and reporting in our processes. So in most of the cases, we have the data that we need for reporting: lab analysis with maintenance history, lubricants purchase and disposal balance. All the other needed CO2 data is coming automatically from the analysis service. Logging the service, and we can initiate our CO2 analysis. We can upload data in 3 ways. Easiest to start with is by filling up a form. We can also upload data in a separate file, or integrate data import to existing data repositories for larger datasets. Once we have the data imported, FluidEye calculates automatically a health index to machine and oil. It calculates existing CO2 emissions per day, year, and over fluid's lifetime, and gives an example estimate of CO2 emission savings if we would double the life cycle of the oil. We can also simulate our CO2 emissions and see how oil's lifetime extension would impact to our emissions and net zero targets. Based on the simulation, we can set up new targets and get advice on how to achieve this new goal. This way, we have all the relevant data collected, history of data, and the way to record and report all the future activities. Based on this, we get automatically our fluid health and emissions analyzed, model to simulate and optimize our activities, and needed reports to our organization's greenhouse gas reporting. So, to sum up, we've seen that lubricants have a very clear role in our organization's race to net zero. And we are also seeing that we are moving towards more formal reporting and auditing. We are foreseeing some more regulation coming from many different authorities like EU, Federal Reserve, and so on. So many of the global organizations have started to report Scope 3 already, where lubricants also fit. And yeah, companies are facing more challenges to find sources to CO2 emission reductions. But as we saw, lubricants is a really good way to bring the quantified contributions to our net zero. And it's also fairly easy to analyze and automate the reporting and integrate to our other reporting processes. So targeting net zero from lubricants perspective increases our reliability, and we can see the benefits on our bottom line. Thank you for your interest, and let's continue our discussion over the Q&A.
Hey, Mika, great presentation. Second or third time I watched the presentation and I still enjoy it. It's really, really interesting. Hey, you were summing up you have a very good summary, and I really like your graph where you show that in the beginning there's a lot of actions that we can take that will quickly, have an impact. And then as we move on, actually it takes more time and resources to get the same, reduction. And one of your slides is also showing the consumption of lubricants. And as we know, lubricants is basically unavoidable. We need lubricants. And McKinsey reports and other reports are showing that, in the coming years, it's going to continue increasing, not at a very high pace, but still there's no decline overall in lubricant consumption. So although the impact 0.5% you were showing, or 0.05% in terms of CO2 emissions, is small compared to let's say the entire CO2 emission contribution. But every action counts, and that's something we have learned. Every action counts. But then I go to my question, because now it's becoming more fashionable, and then people understand that something needs to be done. But is it not still seen as an expense and something that, companies could think, yeah, lubricants, let's just replace, it's a consumable. We have better things to do, bigger fishes to, So how do you see this? Is it really seen as a cost? Because Vanda was saying it's expensive investment at the beginning, but the results are evident. Obviously, she has a good opinion on this. How do you see this?
Yeah, I think that in general, I guess Vanda's comment potentially was about the overall ESG analysis and reporting, and that of course it is a big push for any organization. It is an investment, but if we narrow it down to lubricants, I think that many times still lubricants are seen as just like a OPEX cost that you basically cannot avoid, when we've been working around this area and preparing for this seminar as well, I've just got much more stronger vision that basically when we talk about lubricants, really going to net zero is not an expense, but more like an item that really makes your bottom line better. So because there are so many contributors here, so once you start addressing like net zero, you start like automatically taking those proactive measures more serious. You potentially follow your food performance more regularly, and then you come in the benefit. So of course reliability is getting better. You are seeing less like unplanned downtimes. Of course, once you are extending life cycle of the oil, then you are also seeing reduction in lubricant expenses. And as what we have seen in many presentations today and yesterday here is that actually friction and that link to lubrication and energy consumption is something actually that is potentially doubling or tripling the CO2 benefits that we can get once we are focusing to lubricants. So even though it's like under 1% of the global emissions, but once we start seeing these also like energy saving opportunities, it's several percentages many times. So then it starts counting, and so as I said, every action and every drop counts. So definitely, it's a positive thing that we should all address.
Yeah. Thanks. And then we will still have 1 minute, and it was not in your presentation, but I read a while ago, and I forgot the percentage, but there's a significant percentage of lubricants in general that end up their life into the soil. So basically that are not disposed of correctly.
Yeah.
So here we speak a lot
true.
about CO2 emissions, but there's also the flip side is the waste. And I was really surprised by that figure. I don't quote me, but
Same thing. Yeah, it's tens of percentages that are ending up in a landfill or other soil or rivers. So I think that's something that we need to really stop happening.
Indeed. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So we it's just 12 o'clock. I think everybody will go for a short break. And well, thanks a lot, Mika. Very interesting. And
thanks
see you around
for
a little bit
moderating.
later. Yep.
Yeah.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thank you. Thanks. Bye.